Welcome into the Tour Coach, everybody. I'm your host, Tony Ruggiero, as I am every week here on the Tour Coach podcast. If you've been listening for a while or you've recently started listening, you probably know that, or if you're new, this is really for you, but these are the stories and the conversations and the chats with the people that I meet in my journey in golf, coaching, teaching, playing golf. These are the fitness instructors, the mental coaches, the performance coaches, the other teachers, the players, and the people that I run into day to day teaching and coaching that I think shed interesting perspectives, have great views and information that can help all of you that love the game of golf play better, coach better, teach better, practice better. It's all in an effort to give you the best information. So hopefully you like these conversations here on the Tour Coach. We appreciate all of you listening and watching. And more importantly, or equally as important, we appreciate our sponsors, Mitch McConnell and Buick GMC, Blaine Stokely, Stokely's Midtown Garden Center, Taylor Martino and Rowan. And none of this would be possible without the folks at Shrixon Golf and Vineyard Vines and Bushnell. They've been with us forever. We're going to be with you, helping you play the game of golf better. Enjoy the Tour Coach podcast. Go find us on YouTube, DewsweeperTV. Follow us, like us, comment. All right, so joining me here on the Tour Coach, somebody I've had the chance, came on with us last year, but I've had the chance to get to know a good bit over the last year. Obviously, tons of people out there follow him. A zillion people follow him all over the world teaching. He teaches everything, but he's a short game guru. Derek Deminsky, Golf Better Tucson, got guys and girls all across every tour, especially short game. Going to sit in. We're going to talk short game shots. Derek, my man, what's up, brother?
Always good hanging with you, my man. I look forward to this.
Yeah, no, it's fun. And one of the things, so I was I was teaching a good junior player the other day some short game, right? And what made me think of doing this with you was the kid hit a pretty good shot that would be like where it was hit a little fat, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was a perfect shot. And the kid was like, yeah, but I didn't hit that perfect, right? And it started making me think of your videos. You do such a good job. And you talk about the low point and different types of shots that you can hit with that.
Sure.
To me, that's a little different than like I was brought up to teach for sure. I mean, right? Like
Sure.
And to be fair, most of the really good short game stuff I've learned as a teacher have come from guys that are just really good short game players.
Sure. Yeah.
Instead of the old traditional stuff.
Success leaves a lot of clues. I mean, it's good. That's where I've learned a lot too. Just kind of studying great players and just kind of seeing why maybe their stuff works and what they like. Yeah.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk a little bit about the different ways you teach approach chipping and pitching. And let's talk about some of the ways to hit different things, different types of contact. I think that's pretty important, especially we got a lot of teachers that listen to this. We also have a lot of people aspiring to be really good players. So, I can only get you to hit it so good, you're still going to have to chip it at some point.
Exactly. I want you to have my favorite short game stat is 0 for 0. So I love 0 for 0 up and down.
0 for 0 is good for me too.
Yeah. But, so if you get them hitting it good, I'm good.
Well, then they'd say I don't get them to hit it close enough. But let's go ahead and start with that. Let's talk about how do you approach helping a player improve their chipping, and talk about shot selection, the different types of shots.
Yeah, I think some areas, and short game is my passion, right? I teach all areas, but short game is kind of where I really like it. And what I've found a lot of success really lately, and really where a lot of confusion can be cleared up for even tour players, is are we trying to hit the ball cleanly, or are we trying to use the ground, kind of use the bounce to our advantage? And a lot of times I'll see people struggle when they're kind of caught in between, and there's some certain preferences that I believe fit better with some ball first stuff. And then there's some certain preferences that fit better when we're trying to use the ground if available, right? If it's not like crazy grain, into the grain or anything like that, but we feel like we can use the ground. Like in Tucson, it's just super firm, super usable. And at times that's the easiest route where you have some margin for error there.
That would be tougher in Alabama, Florida, where you have a lot of grain, right?
Absolutely. Right? Yeah, totally. So so going around and traveling, you got to know when the ground is available for use and when it's just not. And you have to kind of make selections based on taking care of the lie to your best ability.
So how do you, I think that's one thing. And, obviously I spend a lot of time with, one of my favorite things to do, you and I know from my talking, is I love developing good young players and college players.
Yes, we see it on your page, dude. Awesome.
And I think one of the things that like young players don't figure out early enough is how to analyze the lie and what they can and can't do.
Totally, yeah.
Tons of really good players that get to the ball and they take the same club out every time and they basically try a lot of the same shots. And it's for sure when you get to like recreational golfers, even 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 handicappers, right? How do you help people learn to assess the lie?
Yeah, that's a great point, right? So a lot of times, and it's dependent on kind of how you're brought up, right? You see a lot of like these Texas guys like Spieth and Scotty kind of have that stab shot, right? Because they kind of grew up in Bermuda. And you see some other guys, if they chip off Kikuya or chip off Bent. Like, so for me, when I grew up, I was very kind of Dave Pell's, very kind of hinge and hold. That worked for me. That was my style. Just that's how I taught myself. It was awesome. And then I get to Arizona, and a 30-yard pitch, I can't hold the green. I didn't know that you could use the ground, or I didn't know what was available. So I just thought maybe I had to flop it. So really, a lot of my instruction to this point, which I've been teaching for 16 years now, like that was part of my development. I had to teach myself that, hey, there's some other ways that I did not know were available because I didn't play enough around the country to know, like, it's a struggle here or there. I just thought every green was soft. I thought I could just hit these normal chips. I didn't need to use the bottom of the club. I just hit it clean. And then my short game developed as I brought in the skill of using the ground. And I see that help a lot of golfers when they know and have a clearer picture of, hey, am I trying to hit this clean, or can I use the ground to help elevate this and get some stopping power?
That's, yeah, I mean, I think that's one thing that is good now with like juniors, college players playing more all the way across the country.
Sure.
Right? Like, so they're exposed to more different types of grasses. When I came up, like I played in Alabama and Texas. I mean, that's basically all you saw, unless,
sure.
But now, so let's get to playing those different types of shots. So let's talk about ball first, right? Now, that's obviously the one I think most people know.
Yes.
I want to start with setup. How do you, because I think so much a short game to me is done a lot in the setup. Like, how do you help people set up? What are some of the fundamentals and the go-tos for you with ball first contact?
Yeah, awesome. And this is where I'm kind of in the middle of this, potential feud. I'm good friends with Joe Mayo, good friends with Parker, both great people, great coaches. And I would agree with Joe. He's very good, and he's gotten Victor really to hit the ball cleanly. Right. So a lot of things, and in my opinion, I just call ball first more like ball striking.
Yeah.
Right. So you can have
just like you would a regular shot. Just
totally.
Like
yeah. We're just literally trying to hit the ball clean. So we're not necessarily trying to use the bounce. We're not necessarily trying to release the shaft. We have a pretty clear picture that we want to hit this clean. The smash is going to be, it doesn't have to be like super high, but it's coming out clean. I like to think of it as just ball striking.
Yeah.
So where Joe, I think, really helped Victor is, hey, you know what? You can hit these really clean, kind of launch them low with spin and get a really good result a lot of the time if that's the shot you're looking for. So,
and I think with Victor, it would make sense because he's a great ball striker, right? I mean, he's
totally.
And wouldn't you say in a situation like that, like if he develops a shot, he can hit it solid all the time, and he, as good as he is, he becomes functional.
Totally. Right. And that's kind of what you're looking to do. It's just like Scotty Scheffler's got to get to 0 strokes gained putting. Phil Mickelson has to get to, I think it was like 0 strokes gained driving or something before he liked his chances. So it's really raising your floor, raising your bottom to the level that you would need. And I think for Victor, and you kind of heard it, he would just kind of mishit too many shots. And then Joe gave him these great options to just make sure he's, moving left, ball back, shaft lean. We can have some rotation. We can kind of hold the angles a little bit. That's what Phil does so well, right? Phil Mickelson, really good at getting the ball cleanly when he wants to. So I would equate just ball first chipping to ball striking. We're not trying to throw the head out. We're not trying to release the shaft. And that's where I see a lot of people, even a couple of my latest tour players, where they get confusion, is they're told all these things, but they're kind of caught in the middle. They're trying to catch the ball clean, but they're doing some things that I wouldn't recommend, to where it's kind of making it harder for them. And as we put both in their separate boxes, that's where I'll see a lot of light bulbs go off, as they just, you kind of get told these things, but you don't really know what category they fit in. Like rotation, just an example. So a lot of times if I'm trying to hit the ball cleanly, I don't mind kind of holding angle and rotating.
Right.
But for some people, if we need them to release the shaft, I need them to not rotate so they can stall and let this head swing. And they're like, oh, I thought I just always had to rotate. You don't always have to, but if you can explain kind of the whys of both and why we might do certain things in certain areas, I see people just get a clearer picture of what they need to do.
So ball first contact, basically ball striking. Where do you have a preference where you like the golf ball to be, and how do you like in the stance, and how do you like the shaft that's set up? And
sure. Yeah. And this would generally be in a sense of, ball middle to back, shaft leaned, 10 to 15 degrees, right? So if you go just the Joe Mayo, it's, 45 degrees, hit down 10 on it. It doesn't have to exactly be that, but ball can be back, shaft can be leaned. We want to make sure, and where people struggle is if they get, I think my camera's reversed here, but if they get right bend, imagine just launching a high drive, right? If you're a right-handed golfer launching a high drive, you have some tilt to your right.
Correct.
And conversely, if we want to kind of move that low spot forward, we would have some left tilt and some potential movement towards the target. So we're trying to make sure the low point comes in front of the ball. We catch the ball cleanly, much like we would hitting, a golf shot when we're trying to hit it clean and pure.
So this is me learning, right? Like I picked your brain a bunch walking around Valhalla. So like when I think of trying to get, I'll get folks to set up a little bit with even like their sternum a little bit in front of the ball.
Totally. Yeah. That would fit ball. That would fit ball first. And then conversely in ground first, we actually don't want some of those things.
Right.
Kind of keeping them out. Yeah. Good.
And then I think of to hit it solid, you got to get that low point out in front of the ball. So I'm wanting that to be moving around and towards the target for ball first. Is that
love it? Love it. Very good. Yep.
And so I think that to me, that's a good place to start for a lot of golfers, right?
Yeah. I mean, the average person needs to be able to hit it clean in a short shot, right? If you get the right things in place, if we think about it, in the full swings, you see a lot of unique moves, and I see a lot of unique. The full swing is always a full swing, so it's kind of all this one piece. But really, when it comes down to it, to kind of hit a 10-yard chip cleanly, if you get the setup correct and get some general movements in there, it shouldn't be this massive challenge. But for a lot of people, it can be, right?
It can be, yeah.
Finding the right fit so that they can do it more often.
I think when you get these folks that have what you would call like chipping yips, or where they're like I just call them freakouts, right? And you see them with guys that are good players. I'm not talking tour players most of the time, but they get around the green and it's like it's short going back, no turn, nothing. They're behind the ball, and then they're trying to create everything with the hands and arms. And to me, a lot of that's just fixed by setup, right? Like
Yeah. A lot of the yip stuff, and that's an area I would say I do have a specialty, and I get a lot of people to fly in, and that would be one, right? Where if it's too short and it needs this, what I call panic speed through the ball, right?
That's what I.
But also it's because they've underloaded the backswing. So most yippers are doing what's needed. It's not the best recipe, right? So if I bring it back short and I just coast through, well, now it's always going to be short of their target. So then they kind of need this panic speed, but we'd prefer, maybe lengthening the backstroke and doing some other things so they don't need to do some of those flinchy movements. And I'll rate a lot of my yippers on a scale of 1 to 10. And I get some people, they think they have the yips, and I'm like, oh no, you just suck. You're just bad. You're just terrible. We can fix it, but they ain't nothing with yips. And then I get these 8, 9s, 10s who have those spastic movements, these explosive movements.
How do you deal with that?
That's a tough one. Now, a lot of times, in a lot of the things I've measured, it's
Alcohol?
a lot of these ups and downs.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of these explosive movements. So like an example would be if I have a short gamer who kind of moves up in the backswing and then they have these late downs. So they got to kind of dip it in there and pull it out. And they've just kind of learned to do that or have got into that habit. So then generally we need to replace some of those ups and downs. And this is kind of what you'll see, in short gaming, generally there'll be kind of this down to up movement. And then in ball striking, there can be more of that kind of up and kind of get down and rotate. So it's really explaining those pieces and trying to get some differences in there. Now, a lot of times too, with yippers, and there's a lot of ways to fix them, and I fixed them multiple ways, but generally, as you can get them to use the ground where they're not so scared of having to make this perfect shot, I've seen a lot of success come from helping yippers use the ground in a way that seems simple and easy.
That's fantastic stuff there. Now let's talk about, ground first interaction. Okay. And I've watched you talk about this a good bit with Andy a few times. When do you go to that shot? How do you set up to play that shot? What are some of the keys? Because to be fair, I think for probably recreational golfers where it could really help, they're probably scared to death.
Totally.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And this is where a lot,
And I think probably going like what we talked about the other one, they're probably set up trying to hit the other shot and then they're caught between both.
I see that exactly right. So then they want to try to use the bounce, I call it using the ground, right? You can use the bottom of the club, but we're trying to use the ground to our advantage. And what'll happen is they'll have some of these ball first things in there to where, in my belief, this is where I think Tiger struggled in the past, is every time they touch the ground early, it does dig.
Mm-hmm.
So then they're afraid to touch the ground. So now they hit some fat, they lay the sod. They know that, okay, well, now I don't want to touch the ground. Well, now I hit some thin, and then I hit some good. So it's this fat, thin, okay combo because they have too many ball first elements when they're trying to use the ground. And they don't have a good path going forward to do that. So I do see that cause a lot of struggle. And or, again, when we're trying to hit the ball cleanly, kind of doing some things to hit the ground first. So getting the pieces in their baskets, as I've just taught long enough and as I've seen enough people struggle, I've just kind of learned that their intentions for one of the two don't match up.
Yeah. And
then as you get them to match up, the light bulbs go off, their touch can be shown, and it's a cool thing to see.
Touch is that's where I'll see, folks, they get pretty good at either ball first or whatever, but then they've got to develop that skill.
Absolutely.
Right? Touch, feel, how far to carry it. I do a lot of with young players where I have them take 3 wedges, they're 3 wedges, and go put tees in the ground and put where they think they need to land it for each club to get it to the hole. How do you teach touch? How do you help develop that with players?
Yeah, this is a good point. And a couple of the more recent players I've worked with, if every time, and this isn't always true, but from what I've found it to be true, if you're a great putter and you're a poor short gamer, I've always found that you're probably not using the best technique in your short game. That's just what I've found. But because that usually means you have good touch. Now, if you stink at putting and you stink at short game, you might just have brick hands. You might just have no touch, right? You're last at the beer pong. Ain't no one picking you for cornhole. You're gonna throw a Hail Mary. You just got no touch. There's a simple drill I like to do and even have tour players do. It's just very common to hit chips from 5 to 15 yards. It's just a very common shot. You're just going to have a lot of them, right? It's kind of like practicing 4 to 5 foot putts. You're just going to have a million of them. It's worth your time to be good at it. So I have a drill where I put out kind of tees or targets or cones, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, and 15 yards. I like students to hit 24 shots. You kind of go in groups of 6, 4 times, and you just get really good at landing the ball. You see a target at 5 yards and you chip it to that target. And I've found through myself and through testing, I've never seen anyone really great at that drill be a terrible short gamer. And that really helps you gain strokes on easy chips. Because, everyone's like, hey, how do you hit that high, soft, stopping shot into the green elevated? And I'm like, that's not the one that's going to make you a great short gamer. It's when you have these basic chips where you're maybe having a, off drive, you laid up short of the green, 45 feet, vanilla chip. You need to get this to tap in. You need to get this. We need to gain strokes on easy chips, and that's where I see that 24-ball drill. Again, just essentially chipping to targets, even with no rollout, even with no green. If you can do your job in chipping and land it 5, 7, 9, just kind of get good at those, I just see that really take player short games to the next level.
You'll like the story. I think it's kind of along those lines. One of the guys I've taught a good while, Rick Lamb, plays out there.
Mm-hmm.
He's good. He's got a marvelous story. He's good friends for being on the West Coast of Florida with Paul Azinger.
Awesome.
And Zinger was around at the U.S. Open at Torrey Pines, hung out and chipped. But he was telling Rick to hit bunches of 20, 30, and 40-yard shots every day, know how far he carries them. And the whole thing was, he was like, think of how many of those that are straightforward you get in a round of golf, but nobody goes to practice.
Yeah.
Right? And I'll never forget, like, Rick had that amazing year. He, like, Monday qualified, I don't know, 5 times or some shit. But how many times it was like, man, a long par 4, you've hit 2 pretty good shots, you're just in front of the green, pins middle, it's 30 yards.
Yep.
20 yards, right?
Got to be automatic. Exactly. We want it autopilot. And
don't you think, though, that too, what you were talking about there, if people just got better at those simple ones, to me they do okay on the hard ones. They screw
exactly.
Up a lot
exactly. And then really you don't want to practice a lot of these hard ones, in a sense that if you're out of position, and I had Scott Fawcett in, and we're kind of working on these shots and really tough shots. He's like, hey, well, how should I hit this? And I would ask him, hey, what do you think your expected score is here?
Okay.
And he's like, probably a 3. So at that point, it's also recognizing, hey, if you're out of position, we can put this to 20 feet. Like, we're way out of position. We're dead. We need to make a 3. We don't need this hero shot and blow up and make a 6 or 7. Now we've kind of thrown our round down the drain. But exactly to your point, these basic shots, these, it's like working on 4 to 5 foot putts. You got to be good at getting efficient when you're around the green, and it's pretty easy to just make those automatic, get them inside 3 feet often with your short game skills.
What you talked about, basically taking your medicine, and the stuff with Fawcett, it's wonderful. Hard to get people to understand.
Oh, totally.
Right. But yet, I think tour players do better jobs of it than most things, but still, I think there's some of the harder people to convince.
Yeah.
Totally. You know what, from here, 13, 14 feet's a good shot, and it's okay, but it takes double out of the way.
Yeah, and it's kind of knowing the proximity numbers and knowing some of the basic stuff. I've got a couple caddy pro combos. They rate the short game shots like from 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3. And 3 is kind of, you're just, hey, we're dead. We're trying to actually kind of make a 3. But you need to dominate. You need to gain strokes on the 1s, 1.5s, and 2s, in my opinion. 2s are generally more of the ground first. We need a little bit more stopping power. We can use the ground. 1s to 1.5s are just what I call lag chips. It's the pin's 50 feet away. It needs to feel as easy as a 50-foot putt. And we just have to get it within, 3 to 4 feet often. It should be that simple.
Now, so, talk those vanilla, the 30, 40, 50 footers. It's like a lag. But what do you advise, if any? I mean, what club selection do you like for players?
And this is preference. I bring 4 wedges to every shot. I bring 60, 55 gap wedge, pitching wedge. I'm old school. I like landing it close, letting it roll out. I like removing a lot of spin.
Yeah.
And I'm always in favor of doing the simplest thing. Now, sometimes the simplest task, if there's a ridge, it's throwing it past the ridge. That's the simplest task. I don't want to hit pitching wedge and try to run it up. But often I'm trying to land it 2 to 3 steps on, let it roll to the hole. I've just found for myself when I play, I hit so many bad shots that get close because I feel like I'm just doing such little work. Mm-hmm. But a lot of kids like 60, 56. And if you can prove to me, if you get really good at landing it on your spots, and really, if you can show me stats that would back up your, using one club, because a lot of kids say, hey, I love using 60. And I look at their stats and I'm like, well, you must love making tons of bogeys because it ain't working. So a lot of the kids I teach at the club, if it's just off the fringe, I don't let them grab a wedge. You're putting this. You ain't good enough. And I would putt this. I putt a lot of shots, and I'm, as good of a short gamer as I know. So it's really using course management, being smart. I tell everyone, if you had to hit this shot 100 times and take the average, what would be your play? And then that's kind of where they're like, okay, maybe I wouldn't hit this hero shot. Maybe I would kind of run it up there. Maybe that's more of the high percentage average.
Mm-hmm. I think the club that I'll see really good chippers and tour players use that I see others not use very much is I see really good chippers use the gap wedge a lot. Their gap wedges to run it a lot.
Totally.
Get shots because they can kind of control it. It doesn't have as much spin, but it'll release and they can control it. Whereas versus the guys really trying to be precise with their 60s. And for me, the window's so small. You got to hit us. And there's folks that are unbelievable at it. We coach them. But again, I just think that's a low percentage shot.
Yeah. And that's, I put that in a lot of the long-term category for players because short-term, I don't want them to go on the course and try a pitching wedge if they never have. Mm-hmm. But that's why I like players for the long term to go up to their first iron that's not a wedge, right? So even my gap wedge is kind of that wedgy wedge style. And then my pitching wedge is like an iron because I know my pitching wedge will never check up. It will never check. And there's value in knowing when something will never spin. Oftentimes, and for a couple of reasons, if you use 60, like we've talked about, and you're trying to fly it further, well, now you have a bigger dispersion. That's a harder shot. It's harder to land the ball accurately at 25 yards than it is at 7 yards. So you're kind of doing more. Now, again, it can work, but you're making this bigger swing. There might be potential for more to go wrong. But if you're comfortable with it, if the stats say to do that, again, I'm good with whatever you're doing if the stats are what you need. Then I'm very lenient if the stats are statistically what you would need to be where you want to be.
And that's why I think for folks really wanting to get better, obviously Scott Fawcett's program, I've done a bunch of stuff with that. You got to use something like that because I don't think the player, their ego, everything plays into it. That doesn't give you the real picture of what's going on.
Sure.
You got to have something unbiased that tells you if you're trying to get better, hey, am I really good enough at chipping from X distance?
Sure.
To be able to go to somebody like you and to know if their approach is worth it.
Yeah. And that's a lot of times I'll do that 24 ball test.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had a player come in, awesome player. Everyone would say that their short game technique was good. They were great. I tested him in the 24 ball drill. And I said, you have probably the worst touch I've ever seen a world-class player have. It is terrible. You cannot hit a chip within 2 yards of your target at 6 or 7 yards.
Yeah.
Now, the good news is you can practice that.
Right.
You can practice that. But then at that point, they were thankful. They said, oh, great. I've always known statistically I'm bad, but no one's told me why. Because they say, oh, the form looks good. This looks great. But when we test their ability to land it where they want and perceive that rollout, just no good at all. Just absolutely not good. So we gave them a clear path to improve that area.
So last one to touch on bunker play. Watched a bunch with that with Andy and stuff. Talk about some of your keys to bunker play. That's another area too where tour players love them generally.
Yes.
Recreational golfers are scared to the bejesus out of them.
Correct. And there's some logic there too, right?
Yeah.
The bunkers that the average person plays are way more difficult than these pristine, manicured tour bunkers. So
and tour players go batshit when they have to play a place.
Absolutely right. Whenever a bunker's bad, they just you can tell they're so used to these perfect bunkers that when it's a little firm underneath, they let everyone know. They'll smash the sand. They'll kind of let you know that it wasn't perfect. But generally, some basic keys I like is, if you just draw a line in the sand, that's your entry point, right? And we set up and kind of brace in a way where just generally, I like kind of a little bit wider stance, braced a little towards your lead side, kind of in that lead quad. From there, generally, as players use a little bit more wrist in the backswing to load it, I see entry point improve. If it does get a little too wide around, too big a turn off the ball, the entry point can be compromised. So if the average person just draws a line in the sand, perpendicular to where they want to go, you can hover the club and or just in training. I don't mind if you ground the club in training. Just practice hitting on the line and in front and getting really good at that skill. That's going to give you a lot of predictability. And what I thought, and if you watch kind of one of those live videos, it was Phil talking to Bryson. And I think Bryson asked Phil how he got so good. And it was kind of along the lines of what we're talking about. Phil just said, if statistically you're going to hit a lot of, I think it's like a 15-yard bunker shot. You're going to hit a ton of that. So he just worked on 15-yard bunker shots and got really good at that. And then, if it's a little further, he's got that feel. If it's a little shorter, he's got that feel. So you don't really need all these crazy shots. You need to get good at your entry point. You need, one shot that's kind of a short-sided. You need one middle and kind of one long. And I'm more than okay using less loft if you need to go further as well.
That was going to be my question. I like that. I like to have, as golfers start getting better, like I like them, like if they can hit a 15-yard bunker shot with, say it's their 60 or say it's their 50.
Yeah. Sure.
It's a little shorter, make the same swing with a 60.
Yeah.
Then a little longer, use their gap wedge or their pitching wedge as long as there's no lip.
Exactly.
Like to me, you develop a skill set and you get some confidence, and you got 3 or 4 shots there, like that can probably handle 60, 70% of the shots.
Exactly. It's a very clear plan. You have 4 tangible options. Again, for that player too, they're usually hemorrhaging strokes from bunkers. So it's like, hey, if I just kind of have this short-sighted 5-yard shot, I've got a 15 and I've got a couple, it's like, man, we can use those a lot to just not make huge scores and give some par putts, but easy tap in bogeys is kind of what the average, handicap golfer probably wouldn't mind.
Yeah, agreed. That's awesome. Derek, this is awesome, man. You're great to hang out with. You're great.
I always love hanging with you, brother.
Love hanging. We got to get you down to Old Palm sometime to hang out. Bring you from the left side of the country.
Would love to. I was down there fairly recently in Jupiter, and it was still a little too hot.
It was too hot.
Let me know when it cools down.
It's just starting, man. It's tough to do January, February, March down there.
Yeah. Although I'll come down then.
Perfect. I'm looking forward to more work this year. We got to do this again. Appreciate the time, and we help some folks chip it better today.
Absolutely. I always love hanging with you, man. Keep up the great work.
Hey,
and,
real quick, let everybody know how to follow you. Most people do, but stuff all the time.
Yep. Website, golfbettertucson.com. I'm most active on social media at Instagram, golfbettertucson.com. Again, I'm Derek Deminsky, teach out of the 49er Country Club in Tucson, do some stuff online, but just enjoy, love all of golf. I'm a golf nut, golf junkie, golf nerd. Short game's the passion, but just absolutely love playing this game and teaching this game.
And you're great at it. I appreciate it, buddy. Look forward to talking soon.
Hope to see you soon, T.
See you, brother.